सुभाष जी वो जान हिंद आ गए है नाज जिस पे हिंद को वो शान हिंद आ गए।
Jai Hind. My dear students, in my last speech, that means the fifth speech of this series of discussions, on 20th March 2020, actually it was a discussion pertaining to fear psychosis of British over Netaji's horrific anti-British movements since his student's life. How he had put British in tremendous troubles, either in India or in England, either in students' life or in political life. Every phase British were traumatized by Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. That was why British always had to find out the new ways to restrict the movements of this most aggressive national leader Subhash Chandra Bose during that period. Often they put him into jail. I just take you back to the later part of 1939 to June 1940. While Congress was wholly being defeated to Subhash Chandra Bose in Tripura and became further president, but Congress under Gandhi forthwith unlawfully forced him down from the presidency. That means presidency of AICC, All India Congress Committee, and ultimately Subhash Chandra Bose had to resign from the post despite having the huge mandate. As you know very well that Pattavi's defeat is my defeat. It was a slogan of Mahatma Gandhi. And during that period in Tripura Congress, he was forced to resign. Even Rabindranath Tagore, the great poet of our country, was very much annoyed at this heinous attitude of Gandhi and his coteries to Subhash Chandra Bose, and he publicly announced and kept his absolute confidence on Subhash Chandra Bose as a real national leader. After his resignation from AICC, he formed All India Forward Bloc, as you know, and through this bloc, what he had done, a tremendous job for India. He made 1,000 public rallies in which he had appealed to the people of India not to cooperate with England in our war efforts, because this war was not being fought for India's cause. What British were doing during that period? They were collecting soldiers. On the contrary, the people should remember the success of British in the Second World War would further perpetuate her rule in India. And because of this propaganda, the war preparation of England in India suffered a serious setback. My dear students, it is noteworthy to be mentioned that during the First World War, Britain had succeeded in recruiting more than 15 lakhs Indian soldiers, including Gandhi's recruitment of 1 lakh soldiers for the British in World War I. But this time, only due to Subhash Chandra Bose's sensible propaganda, the British could not recruit not more than 1 lakh soldiers within 15 months of their mammoth propaganda, while Gandhi and his coteries had the huge moral supportive stance to this war effort. and they were in favor of British government. These had caused tremendous anger to British over Subhash Chandra Bose, that the person was the sole responsible for such a less recruitment of Indian soldiers in the Second World War. Now he was regarded as a perfect mass leader, successfully and effectively challenged Gandhi and Gandhites. Not only British, even the Gandhi and Gandhites were also being challenged by Subhash Chandra Bose. Whole concern for British centered on Subhash Chandra Bose in India. Firstly, he defeated Gandhiji in 1939 AICC conference with a havoc margin in Tripuri. And secondly, his massive propaganda caused British to put in such a jeopardy at the war effort. British had carefully noticed it. So British thought him to be restricted immediately by putting him into jail, not to release before the ending of Second World War. In July 1940, Subhash Chandra Bose was arrested in connection with his involvement in the movement for the removal of the Holwell Monument in Calcutta. While in jail, he was mentally upset. He needed to come out of jail during this World War, and which was started in 1939. And he went on hunger strike until and unless he was released from the jail. Ultimately, a sensational letter was written by Netaji himself to the British government, which in turn forced the government to release him in December 1940. During this period, the pseudo-moralist Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi and his coteries went on propagating for British in the hope of British would ultimately give them the independence when the Second World War was over. Side by side, the other parties in India, there were so many parties, communist parties and other regional organizations, those were taking the movement against British. Side by side, their role were dubiously absent in the role at this opportune moment. No proper outfit was formed that would have motivated the Indian to plunge into a strong protest against the British Raj in India. However, Subhash Chandra Bose foresaw the situation and planned to go outside India to organize an all-out war effort on British with the help of Indian prisoners of war in Germany. This was just the situation for India's liberation could be achieved if there was a strike from outside India. As he knew the German-Russia non-aggression pact in the ensuing World War, so he targeted first to reach Russia. While he was released in December 1940, he was interned in house with 24 hours close surveillance of Calcutta Scotland Yard. He started planning to draw up a blueprint in which he would be succeeded in slipping out from his house, putting aside his family members in one side and the British government on the other. He contacted his confidential party members from Northwest Province and made a strategy, keeping here with his nephew Cecil Bose as a driver for a long drive from Calcutta to Dhanbad. The auspicious moment came for leaving his dearest motherland with a promise to liberate her from the British yoke. In the night 16th and 17th midnight of 1941, Netaji left his Elgin Road house, India, by a car driven by Sisir Bose from Calcutta to Dhanbad, and after spending a few hours in the house of Dr. Ashok Bose, one of his nephews, who was the doctor in mining in Asansol or something in that area, he went there and stayed for a few hours. And therefrom he proceeded to Gomu and took Amritsar mail in disguise of Muhammad Ziauddin, an insurance agent. I just tell you in nutshell, but there is a huge story which is not be completed within a few hours or few days. It will take long times to say the Netaji's movements and his activities to complete. He reached Pathankot, the final station of British Indian Railways, and then to Kabul in Afghanistan. He had to stay in Kabul in the house of Uttam Chand, who was a fed up socialistic revolutionary then. Well, Netaji stayed there for 2 months in making revolutionary grounds with his own men and tried to motivate them utmost. Actually, they became very faded up due to the activities of the then communist roles and their socialistic ideological peoples. So they were very much demoralized, and to demoralize, to demotivate, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose had to stay there for 2 months. Instead of that, and then he prepared for his own way of actions to be taken in afterwards. He wanted to get a visa for Moscow as his first choice from Afghanistan, Kabul. Due to some diplomatic complexities, he did not get the visa for Russia. Instead of that, he got a transit visa to Moscow as an Italian diplomat in the pseudonym of Orlando Mazzotta. From Kabul to Tashkent, he had to travel by a car, and he boarded a train to reach at Moscow. From there he flew to Berlin. Just think, my dear students, the courage of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose at the age of only 44 years, as an one-man army left India in disguise, managed everything single-handedly. Every step he faced with tremendous onslaught from weather and the people alike. Both were badly unknown to him and mostly against him. Besides this, the evasion from the spying put by the British intelligence there in Afghanistan, Subhash Chandra Bose ultimately reached Berlin. Now he was free from danger of British ingenuity or British territory, free from the British territory. He reached Berlin on 2nd April 1941 and he met Mr. Wehrmann, the Under Secretary of German Foreign Office, on 3rd April 1941, where he had been received cordially and had a long discussion for India's liberation between them. Mr. Wehrmann requested Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose to place his memorandum so that he would process and discuss with his foreign minister, Mr. Ribbentrop. He was a cabinet minister in Hitler's cabinet. Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose knew the fact. He knew that the fact that in international relations was indeed a very complex and intricate game. It was only interest of profiteer which was permanent and not the friends. That why it is said that in politics there is no permanent friend and foe. Every time that can be changed. At the moment it is suited for the parties, those who are making their understanding in the international relations. Nobody helps other without serving one's own interest. For fulfilling his objectives, Subhash Chandra Bose's objectives, he very intelligently availed the services of the German Foreign Office and the Indian Working Group. He secured permission not only to establish Free India Center and the Indian Legions, but also to broadcast through independent radio only on the issues of India's liberation, and it has circulated to the worldwide. He met German Foreign Office and he met Mr. German Foreign Office and he met Mr. Ribbentrop, the Foreign Minister of Germany, on 29th November 1941. He tried to persuade him to grant recognition to the provisional government of Free India in exile. He made his first radio broadcast from Berlin in Germany in March 1942, wherein he requested the Congress leaders not to be entrapped by accepting the Cripps mission sent to India by the British in unity. British continued their propaganda through British Broadcasting Corporation, that means BBC, and which in Netaji's terminology was Bluff and Bluster Corporation. So Congress should not believe in BBC's propaganda. These radio broadcasts of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose from Berlin made a tremendous impact in India. In one side, the common people leapt up with joy that their real national leader at heart made the mighty British fool, and on the other hand, the British were really unnerved by knowing such an incredible task done by Subhash Chandra Bose, which downgraded their mighty British image before Indians and world alike. At the same time, Indian National Congress leaders were put to a trash in a dustbin in the eyes of a common people in India and politicians of world alike. In Germany, the meeting between Subhash Chandra Bose and Hitler was held on 29th May 1942. There were several issues discussed between the two leaders. Hitler was greatly impressed by the sound knowledge of Subhash Chandra Bose and his charismatic approach towards the liberation of his motherland. He was so charmed. Hitler was so charmed to see Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose that Hitler, even acknowledged in an uncharacteristic manner, shedding his condescending attitude, that he was the leader of 7 crore Germans, but Subhash was the leader of 38 crores Indians. Germans salute you, Subhash. I also salute you. Hitler just bowed down his head and told to Subhash Chandra Bose that Germans salute you, Subhash. I also salute you. The sycophant historians of Gandhi Nehru have never put this down in the history books of students who study from school to university level, because the so-called great men of India's freedom fighters, Gandhi, Nehru, Patel, Azad and their coteries would stand sarcastic before the magnitude of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. Though the political impulse of Hitler was something different from Netaji's outlook, because his intention towards invade Russia was really not in the mind of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, which declined, but Hitler was adamant. And Netaji wanted to convince that it would not be a good gesture for Hitler to attack on Soviet. but he was adamant. So political stance of Netaji took a new shape. He understood that there would be a problem to work in Germany. Eventually, the debacle of Germans in Europe and Russia had forced Netaji to plan to shift the field of his activities to Southeast Asia, where Japan was succeeding and had reached very close to India. Hitler approved his plan despite his difference of the opinion between the two leaders, the great leaders, and promised every type of help to Subhash Chandra Bose. Hitler undertook to arrange a safe route for Netaji from Germany to Japan. That means Europe to Far East. When Netaji suggested trying the air route, Hitler warned him against it and commented that Netaji was too important a personality in these circumstances to risk his life like that, because he could not take any risk, as he sent 12 aeroplanes from Germany to Japan just to secure his route to be safely he can be able to reach the Far East, means Japan. Hitler was very keenly interested in the safe transportation of Netaji from Europe to Southeast Asia. He was reported to have personally explained the sea route to be followed. This shows his involvement and concern for Netaji and his efforts. Before his departure from Germany to Japan, it is worthwhile to sum up that he could secure diplomatic immunities, secure all the financial assistance, and without any restraints, Indian prisoners of war were engaged principally on behalf of Indian independence. Accompanied by Abid Hassan, he left Germany, means Subhash left Germany on 8th February 1943. His departure was kept a closely guarded secret. In fact, in order to camouflage his departure from Germany, a few of his speeches were recorded, which were broadcast later on at regular intervals. After 93 days of hazardous journey, Netaji landed in Savang Island. To the Britishers, it must have been a nerve-breaking news that once again their arch-enemy had ditched them and reached a point from where he could pounce upon them with drastic consequences. This was as if just slitting the throat of British ingenuity, the remaining hate to be disbalanced. This is just an anecdote of quarter of Netaji's task in exile. Greatest tasks are remain to be told to you, my dear students, in the next episodes, why and how British were so terrified by Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. Thank you. Jai Hind. Next episode, I will discuss you in the latter part of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose's to reach in Japan, and therefore he organized his Azad Hind Fauj and Azad Hind government, basically, which is the main part of Azad Hind Fauj, for which he had to declare war against Anglo-Saxon in 1921, in 21st October in 1943. Thank you. Jai Hind.